Hello everyone and welcome to a Scrabble tournament recap on this channel. So far the only English Scrabble content that I've uploaded have been my two video essays on Scrabble's greatest of all time, Nigel Richards. But now since we've already met, I hope to also be able to interest you in my own journey as a tournament player. I recap every tournament that I play in German, which if you somehow can't tell is my native language of course. And I've been doing that for years, but last week I finally had the chance to fulfill a long-time goal of mine and play an official tournament in English. If we're being very pedantic, I've already had like 5 official games in English, but these did not count for the worldwide ranking, just for the British one. So this is basically my first tournament, and I hope that this might be interesting for you to watch. In part because we're not going to see Will Anderson, Macmella, godlike Scrabble here. Instead, we're going to see something that is a bit more realistic for most of you, but where you can hopefully still learn something. Because I'm a beginner in playing English Scrabble, but of course, I'm not a beginner to Scrabble in general. I'm one of the top players in German. I've won our national championship twice, so I can hopefully still teach you something here, but at the same time, it's not going to be Scrabble on a level that is out of reach for most viewers. Not at all, not in the slightest actually, and we will see that later. And we will quickly get to the actual games, and you can skip there if you like using the video chapters below. But I do want to talk a bit about the background to this tournament and about my prep going into it. So, this tournament was organized by none other than my good friend Ben Berger, seen here in our game at this actual tournament that we will look at later. And notice our identical hats in this photo, basically identical. Ben has had this hat for a long time, and recently my wife got me a very similar one, so that now Ben and I are doppelganger. And some of you might actually know Ben because he's played in English before. He's even played at a world championship before. I think he knows Josh Sokol in person, for example. And in German Scrabble, absolutely everybody knows Ben. He's like the central figure in our community, and he hosts an annual tournament in his hometown of Freiburg. We see the playing hall here. Most of these are the German players, and then at the very end of that playing hall, Ben reserved some space for a small English division this time, just to see how much interest there would be in that. And he attracted a nice field of 12 players, and we see that field here. Note that 2 of the unrated players listed here did not end up playing, so we were 12 people who would play 18 rounds using the Collins Scrabble Dictionary, so the worldwide CSW lexicon, not the NWL lexicon that some of you might be used to watching Macmella. So I just wanted to clear that up. And I like this field for me as a first step because, as you can see from the ratings, I do get to play against established tournaments players here, so I have a nice challenge. But it's also not pointless for me to play here because it's not like I'm going to play 11 Nigels in a row. When I introduced the top seed Chris Vickery to a German player, she said something like, "Oh, wow, so you're like a British version of Nigel," and Chris almost fell out of his chair laughing at that. If you're not familiar with Scrabble ratings, these are basically something similar to ELO ratings, and the world ranking currently goes from people rated like 800 to Nigel, of course, who's rated 2200, and someone like Will Anderson would be, I don't know, 2000, 2100. So Chris is a strong player, but I'm not in the very upper levels of Scrabble here yet. So it's not pointless. Chris will probably still be way too good for me to beat, but I hope to otherwise be able to at least win some of my games here. I figured that I might be at like a 1450 or 1500 rating, but it's so tricky to assess your chances beforehand, especially in this weird spot that I'm in, where I'm not a beginner in Scrabble in general, but I am a beginner in this particular language. I had no idea where that combination would take me. And obviously, the first and foremost thing that I should do to prepare, and that anyone does, is to study some words, which of course starts with memorizing the 2-letter words. This is easy enough. This is only about 100. And the 3-letter words. And this is already a bit of a different beast. I think these are 1300 or so words. Easy peasy for Nigel, but not so easy for someone with a normal brain like me. But I did feel pretty confident going into the tournament that I had basically committed all of these to memory. although I wasn't exactly confident that I would not make any mistakes and not mix up something over the board or forget something. But this is important. This is the 3-letter words are the building blocks. You're going to need them so much over the board. So this is an important first step. And then beyond that, you just want to memorize as many 4 to 8 letter words as you can. And in doing that, I focused, and I like to focus especially on words like the one on screen, duja, or something like tawiwi, or exuvie as a bingo. So what I mean are these unusual, bizarre words that might not show up extremely often in the game, but when they do show up, you really want to know them. They can be really valuable because they will often be the only good move in a position. So I see these as something like secret weapons in Scrabble, like collector's cards in a card game, that you can be very happy if you have them in your arsenal. This is not exactly the approach that is typically recommended to beginners who are often told to learn the most frequent letter combinations for bingos especially. So this is what is denoted here by probability, and you can see that something like exuvie is not even in the top 10,000 probability bingos, but it is a very highly playable bingo, which is this symbol or this number. So I focused on studying by playability. I've always been convinced that this is the better approach. Opinions differ in Scrabble, but I like this approach. It's worked very well for me when I started playing in German, so I just did the same thing. Also, this is kind of more fun. These words are fun to study and they stick to memory better for me personally. I don't know about other players, but I can remember these better, so this makes a lot of sense for me. And it also could mean that I get to play some fun words in my first tournament. There's also the flip side, of course, which is that I might not know some very high probability bingos, and we are going to see that a little bit in my games. So I try to study as many of these as possible, but in the time that I had to prepare, I did not get that far. I was happy with my progress, I was enjoying it, but the dictionary is incredibly extensive, and I was very aware that I was only scratching the surface here, and we will definitely see that as well in my games. But studying words is only the technical part of prepping for a Scrabble tournament, so to speak. And it's not the only one. The other part I feel like doesn't get talked about that much, but because Scrabble is a game of making decisions under uncertainty, fundamentally, it is, in my experience, very helpful and pretty crucial to think about your decision-making process beforehand. And I sometimes see people neglecting that, and then they don't really know over the board how to make decisions, and they get into time trouble and they get confused. And it helps a lot to have a mental approach ready before you sit down over the board, especially as a beginner, which I absolutely feel like in this case, even though I'm not new to Scrabble. So I set some goals for myself, and these were the following. Besides the obvious goal of enjoying the experience no matter what, that should always be the basis anyway, so that's kind of like goal number 0 for me to speak. But goal number 1 in terms of how I want to play was to commit to plays quickly, because even if I can tell that there's probably something better in the position, I would get into bad time trouble if I didn't do this. I will be way slower playing in a new language, and I'll have less time to begin with than what I'm used to, because German tournament rules give both players 30 minutes for the game, and here it will be 25. So I don't really have a choice but to kind of do the opposite of what I do in German, where I like to follow that well-known piece of advice that we borrowed from chess. If you see a good move, look for a better one. That is good advice, but as a beginner, it's more important to focus on avoiding blunders and avoiding bad time trouble. So in other words, consistently playing mediocre Scrabble beats inconsistently and slowly playing spectacular Scrabble once in a while, is my point of view. And my second goal was that in the same vein of trying to be consistent, it's a good idea to be very careful about phoning. Losing a turn to phony is very costly. Now, this goal I didn't achieve quite as well as I wanted to. I played 8 phonies in the 18 games, 7 of which were challenged off the board, and we will see some of that in the recap. My next goal was not to go fishing, so don't play very low scoring moves because you're trying to hit a bingo at all costs. That is what fishing is. And this is a very double-edged sword even for top players. Fishing can often be a trap, but for beginners it is even more of a trap. So when in doubt, just take the points. And similarly for me, don't try to be fancy, don't try any fancy strategies, which I might very well be tempted to do because, you know, I'm not a beginner in terms of strategy, so I wanted to remind myself that I really should be careful there because you just can't do fancy tactics soundly with limited word knowledge. It's like trying to sacrifice pieces in chess when you don't even know how they move. And last but not least, I wanted to trust my memory on these weird words that I just mentioned and talked about. It's often difficult to tell if you're misremembering a word over the board, but my experience in that regard is that the weirder the word, the more confident I can be that I'm not making it up. So if I see a nice bingo like Kunjevoi or something that's Cungevoi, that's valid in English Scrabble. If I see something like that, I wanted to not chicken out of the nice move like that and trust my word memory. Okay, so much for the theory session, but as a German football saying goes, graust alle Theorie, die Wahrheit liegt auf dem Platz. You can talk about theory all day, the truth lies on the pitch, or in this case, on the board. So let's finally take a look at what happened to me over the board. So round 1, my first tournament game, and I'm going to put myself over the Google's analyzer here so that I don't spoil any answers to puzzles. Round 1, my first tournament game, and I was happy with my draw here because I already knew my opponent in person, which made me just a bit more comfortable on that personal level because I did, of course, have some nerves here going into this. Peggy, who I'm playing against, is a German-American living in Berlin, extremely nice person. She opens our game with Jet, and after being very excited about what my first English tournament word would be, it is going to be car. Not too spectacular and not even the optimal move here, but I'll obviously be making a lot of suboptimal plays, so I won't be discussing each and every one of them. This recap will be long enough as it is. So far, this board, incidentally, would still be valid in German, but that quickly changes. My next few moves aren't spectacular either, and on move 4, I already miss one of my goals because I already play a phony. But the thing is that I genuinely thought that this was just a common English word. Larken, I think I mixed it up with Harken. And I was very lucky here that Peggy assumed somehow that I knew what I was doing, which was not a very solid assumption. So this stays on the board. It was the only phony by me in the tournament that stayed on the board. And on the next move, word study pays off for me for the first time, getting 58 points for Youngs. And if I'm mispronouncing that, I will gladly remind you that guessing pronunciations randomly is the hallmark of a true Scrabble player. And 2 moves later, the luck of the draw helps me out because I draw both blanks at the same time. And this makes it not too difficult to play my very first bingo of Cognate. And then a little bit later again, I also draw into the most trivial move in all of Scrabble, QI for 64. And so this made it not too difficult to win this first game. The rest we can go through quickly. So a comfortable, easy start with a lot of luck from the tile back. And game 2 went similarly well, but we'll skip it for now. We don't have time to go through all 18 games here, and instead we will look at the third game. In this game, I'm playing my fellow newcomer here, another unrated player so far, Erik, very nice guy and very impressive. I felt like he was a better player than me, but we will see how this game goes. It doesn't start as smoothly as the others for me, because I miss the bingo on this fantastic opener rack that I draw. And part of why I missed it, I missed the findable bingo, the common bingo. And part of why I missed that was that I didn't take a lot of time here, less than a minute, I think, before playing cop and moving on. If you want to try for yourself, pause the video here. Do you see the common English word that's in this rack? The obscure solution here would have been scapose, but the simple one that I could have found would have been compass. And I probably should have taken a bit more time here to look, but at the same time, it's also important how to think about mistakes. And this is the kind of miss that you shouldn't lose too much sleep over as a beginner. Keeping both S's and the blank with cop means that I'm probably just delaying bingoing. So this is not a situation where missing a bingo loses you like 20 or 30% of winning chances, which would be the case in some other game situations. This loses you 7% according to the engine. And I kind of know that during the game. From experience, I can estimate that not playing a bingo here, if there is one, will probably just cost me 5 or 10% of winning chances. So I'd rather follow my goal of playing quickly here and being okay with just playing cop and moving on. So my point is, as a beginner, don't fret over every move where you might be missing something, and don't see every actual missed play as a catastrophe. Because I'll show you a catastrophe, my next play. Because after my opponent plays Joe, I unfortunately have a similar moment to that in the first game where I thought Larkin was a word. In this case, I believe during the game that basin, the sink, washing basin, is spelled like this. And so I try to play basins here for 102. So the problem here isn't even apparently that I'm misremembering the words that I studied. Instead, I'm misremembering normal English words now and how to spell them. So this comes off the board, Erik challenges it, and this is way worse than the first miss. So I was also wondering here if bassing might be valid as a double-double. This would have been valid, and this would have been 102. And now I don't score anything, and Erik knows my letters now. So these two mistakes, this one and the first one, aren't even remotely comparable. This one cost me 22% of winning chances, and probably even a bit more because the engine doesn't take into account that Erik knows my letters now. And so this mistake I really should have avoided. This was sloppy play on my part. So after text from my opponent, from Erik, I need to try again. I can try underlapping this now, and this time I do take the somewhat risky decision of playing basin, and as I already mentioned, this is valid. Erik didn't even challenge it, and after his play of bite it, we have an even game. But 2 moves later, I draw into a bingo again after getting rid of a surplus of vowels with this play of naoi here, or whatever that word is. And I can now play duration or auditor, but I now was somehow not 100% certain if auditor was valid. Of course it is. It's a completely normal word. But I was so much getting into my own head now, and given that I had already made up 2 words, was going to play it really safe here. At least get a bingo down on the board, play duration, and a few moves later, my opponent is still keeping the score close, but I hit the following combination of letters, which I fortunately knew makes this word, which is my only playable bingo here. Erik replies with a very nice find of his own. You can pause the video and try to find a bingo for him here. There's just 2. There's unmuting, and he spots and plays unmounts with 2 U's and 2 N's. A very nice play. Like I said, he was a very impressive player by my impression. So I'm still in the driver's seat though. And contrary to what I talked about earlier, I could now get a bit fancy on this move. Because, you can take a look and see what you would play. I did not elect to take the very obvious Q spot here, but instead played Dua, and I think the logic should be obvious. The reasoning is that there are still 5 I's to be drawn to give me a 60-point Q play forming IO, which is valid in Collins. And I think is not valid in NWL, but I might be wrong. And it seems decently likely that Erik will not block this spot. This doesn't look like a setup play at all. And of course, my play also creates a diversion down here. And the engine puts my move a little bit behind just playing QI in the sim, but it's solid. And the sim also assumes that I'm going to see the bingos that I will sometimes draw into after playing QI, when in reality I might not know them. And luckily for me, the spot does stay open. I do draw an eye, and it's looking very good for me after this play. But the game is not over yet, and with this rec, Erik absolutely has to try playing his bingo, which doesn't play anywhere else, hooking, bassings. So this is a crucial turn, and I'm the lucky one here, because it turns out that bassing doesn't take an S. The word is valid, but it doesn't take an S hook. I didn't even know imagos though, which is kind of embarrassing, so I challenged both words. And on the next move, Erik instead plays this nice overlap, which is his next best move. And there's still a slight chance for him to hit a bingo through the T or through the S, but I can thwart that very nicely with this move, and the rest is academic. And so I've somehow started with 3 wins in 3 games, which was not at all what I expected. I did lose my next game then, but that was to be expected because I was now playing against Chris Vickery. We are not going to look at this game in detail, but it was actually still an encouraging game because I was keeping it close and actually was in the lead for a long time until Chris bingoed near the end of the game after some dubious plays by me with flavored on his part. I was missing some bingos here that I didn't know, and he plays flavored and wins. But the next 2 rounds were 2 more pretty clear wins. And so, to my surprise, to put it mildly, I found myself suddenly at 5-1. And I was kind of waiting for a terrible game to happen because at some point it had to as a beginner. And the next game finally brought the kind of nightmare game scenario that will sometimes happen to you as a beginner. I'm now playing the number 2 seed, Rory Kemp from Scotland, a young guy, a very nice guy. And he opens the game with a blank bingo of Isolate. But I have also drawn a blank with a more clunky combination though. And the obvious move here, if you've learned the 3-letter words, is fly or whatever that is. But there's a very tempting option here. And you can see what I mean maybe. If something can be inevitable, and as an adverb can happen inevitably, shouldn't the opposite be that something happens evitably? And even though I was careful in general about not phoning, or I try to be, the upside of this move is so good. This is quite a stylish bingo as well, I thought, a nice bingo. And the Scrabble dictionary has so many weird words in it, and evitable turns out is a word, but evitably isn't. Rory challenges it, and it now gets from bad to worse for me. I obviously play fly on the next move and draw perfectly fine tiles. But I get completely stumped now, mentally, psychologically. There's obviously battles in here, or tablets, as another option. But I had no idea that hims or does takes an S, and the bingos just play there. These simple words just play in those spots. In case of dough, I think my doom was that I was mentally remembering this as the sound that Homer Simpson famously makes, dough, which would probably not take an S if that was the meaning, but that isn't what it's in the why it's in the Scrabble dictionary, of course. So I just didn't think about these hooks at all, and I somehow couldn't get myself to play any of the other plausible bingos that I saw, like hittable or something, or stablest, because I absolutely did not want to phony again and was questioning everything now. Scrabble screws with your head so much, with your psychology, and so in the end I played Teabag with the hope that playing long here would at least make sure that the board doesn't get blocked and I can still play a bingo soon. But obviously this is a terrible move and a terrible decision not to try any of the bingos here. And I draw EGPZ next and chicken out of glitz here, and I was not making good decisions now. I didn't know spells with which is a nice move here. Instead, the only thing I find is the very uninspiring, terrible play of Zep, which is not at all what I want to do in this position. I get punished by drawing more consonants and end up just playing golf here, which is incidentally kind of what I wanted to do instead of Scrabble at this point. And it gets worse because the next rack is completely dead. Toe for 14 might even be the optimal move here, which is saying something. And on the next turn, the same is true for Vag for 16. That's the top equity play. So 7 moves into this game now. I am yet to break 100 points. And the only saving grace for me was that Rory wasn't totally running away with it either. But he has now been making defensive moves for a while, and it gets more and more difficult to bingo, at least if you're not thinking of those, which is the bingo line that is completely open here, of course. Keep in mind that Rory knows that I've had the blank since turn 1. So here, not knowing that I could play any of these bingos, I instead decide to throw it wide open by playing metric, half expecting Rory to triple through that C, but he ends up just playing Mace, and I drew the W to the U and play War for 14. I saw the possibility of playing Iwi up here. No, not like that, of course. Like this. But I didn't... Wait, what can I play here? Ivy, like this, sorry. But that closes down this part of the board, and I wanted to retain the possibility of opening up a spot up here, so I played War instead. Instead, Rory now plays up here, and I draw some vowels, and I play Aya for 12, partly setting up an R front hook, and with 144 points after 10 moves, I'm genuinely worried now that I might not break 200 in this game, let alone 300. But somehow, miraculously, that somehow still happens. The 300, I mean. Rory plays Torn, and finally there's a bingo that I know and that I can play on the board here. Bonfin for 73. There would also have been In Urban, which I didn't know. So Bonfin comes down. And 2 moves later, I can play this fun move, setting up my case E for the end game. Because with the remaining letters, this is awkward to block for Rory, and so he doesn't. And I triumphantly crawl over the 300 mark. So after that horrendous start to the game, it felt like the end result wasn't even that embarrassing, and that didn't feel too bad after this game. So that was round 7, and round 8 was a pairing that I was looking forward to because I was now going to play Ben. I've played Ben more than any other opponent in German, with a terrible record, by the way. I think I'm like 10 and 20 against him in German. So it was really fun to get to play him in English. Our game starts slowly with me unfortunately not knowing the boyo hook here, which would have been nice. But after a while, Ben gets the first bingo down playing Threads, which is valid in German as well, incidentally. I run into some awkward wrecks and I miss my standard play of Twixt here, instead playing Wiry, but as is so often the case in Scrabble, I get rewarded for my bad play because I draw into Sitz, a German word, meaning sit down as a command that you would give to a dog. Sitz. 69 points for that, and we have a close game as I play through some clunky wrecks, and this is one aspect that I came to like a lot about playing in English. You can play through these kinds of wrecks. In German, you would have to exchange far more often with stuff like this, ADDIUVX. But in English, you can almost always play through somehow. And so I do that, and after playing Vex in this spot, this is the position for me. And this was a fun move, because now my preparation paid off, looking at weird words, looking at the weird bingos that I mentioned earlier, high playability bingos that are maybe not very high in probability, because that allows me to find the only playable bingo here. And you can pause the video if you want to look for it. The solution is Amoeba, putting me in the lead. Ben opens some more real estate as a reaction to create some more bingo lines on the right for a comeback. And I could now underlap this heavily, but again, I wasn't quite sure enough of these 4-letter words, so I just played Jaws. Again, the principle is I know that these underlapping moves are very likely valid. I think I remember them, but I'm not 100% sure, and I know that Jaws is definitely good, and it cannot be that much worse. That's the key point. Losing a turn would be way worse. So I play this, and a few moves later, I get the second blank, and should be able to take this game home, but it's still a bit tricky. I'm not out of the woods yet. I don't have a spot, unfortunately, for something like accepts here, and didn't really find anything good to do here. It turns out there is a bingo in this position, but not one that I could find. If you're a top player or have studied a lot of words, pause the video and try to find the Nigel move here, which is Sea Catch, a very nice bingo. In the end, I played a move here that was not a very smart decision because it was not in line with the goals that I mentioned earlier. I played Send, thinking that I had the last S and the blank, so this only benefits me, but this is too fancy for my level because Send has other hooks that I wasn't aware of, and this was almost my undoing in this game because after If from Ben and Yui from me, or you setting up another S hook, note that none of the high probability bingos that I have here were part of my very spotty word knowledge. In this case, I would have benefited from studying high probability bingos. So after that, Ben puts down Mention, hooking Cento, and taking a 7-point lead all of a sudden. And Ben was thrilled about this play, and rightfully so. It's worth mentioning, no pun intended with this play, that Ben played this tournament basically with no prep, just relying on his everyday English and some studying that he had done years ago. He was basically just playing in this division so that we could have an even number of players, while at the same time being busy running the entire tournament in 2 languages. So that's quite an uphill battle, and the only reason that this beautiful move here didn't lead to a comeback win for him was my luck in having drawn the other blank, because now I can just play something like School and stay ahead, and I can even afford to challenge Sento, which is valid, and give Ben an extra 5 points for that. So a lucky narrow escape for me, although I also have to say that, you know, I only played Sand because I already had the blank, so you can't really say that it was lucky for me to still win after that. But with this win, we will jump ahead a few rounds in the tournament. After round 11, everyone has played each other once. The round robin portion of the tournament is finished, and I am positively shocked to have gone 8-3. I'm also very aware at this point that I've been really lucky. I've drawn a ton of blanks, more on that later. And I will now be playing the top seeds because I'm so far up in the tournament, so it won't get any easier. And first up is a rematch with Rory, where I hope above all else to get a less embarrassing game than the first one, and it also starts terribly. I open with War, so a word that I've already played in our earlier game, and get hit with a 106-point plushie by Rory. Surprising to me, because I thought I remembered War not taking an S, hence my placement here, so I challenged the hook, but it is valid. And again, it gets worse, because I get basically an identical situation to our first game, where I have a really tempting but also dubious bingo that I really want to play if it is valid. Unforce and Plushier is my play here, and it plays, of course, like this for, I think, 86 points or 89 points. And that turns out to be an unforced error, because unforce is not a verb. Instead, frowns would have been valid and was not in my word knowledge. Rory challenges both words on my phony play here, which is sneaky, because it makes my next turn a bit tricky. After his play of Elegize, Force would still fit for 54, but now, of course, I have to doubt Plushier after his challenge, but thankfully in the end I convinced myself that this is a normal word, plushie and Plushier, and it is, and so thankfully I did play this, and that brought this game back on course a bit. And apparently Rory's challenge was not just a bluff, because he did challenge Plushier again. He plays Armor, and I get to play a fun word that I studied, Noyau. But Rory drops his next fantastic bingo. If you're an expert player, try to find the word that he played with this rag. If you are an expert player, it's probably not too difficult, but I was very impressed with Oxalate for 72. I underlap this with Bit, which is kind of a sloppy mistake, because I should really leave off the T here. The rag leaf is much better. Somehow didn't occur to me. And Rory goes on by playing Pierogi, hooking Forza, and I draw a blank. Like I said, this was becoming a bit of a habit, drawing blanks. I got so many of them, more on that later. And here I wonder for a while if I should actually maybe burn the blank to play Jace for 63, but something like Jedi over here is still a little bit better, especially given my huge deficit here, where I kind of need to hope to draw into a triple-triple. I was a bit sad here on this move that there was no floating E, because I would have known the funny bingo of Jeremiah, but you can't have everything. Rory, to my surprise, leaves the triple-triple open here for another move, probably just didn't have a good play there, and I have, as you can see, the most bizarre pick-off of my entire tournament. Into AR blank after this move, I draw another R, 2 T's, and the other blank, ARRTT blank blank. It's easy to see that there isn't a triple-triple here. It's not happening despite 2 blanks, because the Y in this position is just completely in the wrong spot. But there's, of course, a bunch of bingos ending in Y here, and I played the first one I see, which is tertiary. So the game isn't quite over yet, but the rest is then actually quite uneventful, and Rory easily holds on to the lead. But this was at least a bit more competitive than the first game, so it was a bit encouraging to me. Round 13 matched me with Alan Abela from Switzerland, who had won our first game by about 200 points. So this was another game where I wanted to do better than the first time around. This is my opening rec, and it's again one of those decisions of, should I take the risk here of losing a turn? Because I had some faint memory of reholds being a word, but in the end it was too faint a memory, which makes sense because this isn't a word, so I can't have any memory of it. So instead I just play HO, which is slightly inaccurate. I think my instincts from German carried over here, because EELRS would be a better leaf in German than EOLRS, but this is not true in English. It works out anyway because I draw into leisure, which I studied and which plays here obviously, or in some other spots. But I suddenly get very doubtful here over the board. After already misspelling 2 common words earlier, I start thinking, wait, isn't leisure time spelled with an I? What on earth would a leisure be? So I chicken out of it when I notice that conveniently I can just add leisure to the P and make a word that is definitely valid, but lower scoring. And on my next move, I draw, you guessed it, a blank. But unfortunately, miss a findable bingo here. This was a avoidable mistake. I played it too quickly here after looking for a bingo through the R and not finding one. There are some, but there are 2, but none that I know. But somewhat sneakily, there are common bingos through the U here, where I didn't even really look, I think. If you want to find them, pause the video. Shouldn't be too difficult. If you know that there's something, there's 2 solutions: evaluate and evacuate. So instead, I just play safe and thankfully find a bingo on my next move of putative. I think that's how it's pronounced. My next moves are uninspiring, but I take a narrow lead until Alan puts down this nice find of isotone down here and takes the lead. But I am once again bailed out by lucky draws. 2 of them, first playing Biz here for 56, which is the correct choice according to the engine, over ZTs for a few more points. And then picking up the other blank and playing Stinker, making Oki and Lore. Alan keeps the score close though, and I still need to be careful at this point, and unfortunately didn't really know what to do with this rec. I miss a bunch of plays here, especially this spot here, which I just didn't see. And in the end, absolutely just not knowing what to do, I end up playing Y up here, which Alan after the game pointed out as dubious to me. I think part of this mistake was again instincts carrying over from German, where a W in this position would not be easy to use at all, isn't very dangerous. But in English it works well, of course, and Brawl gets Alan back into the game, especially because I draw into 7 consonants, but at least fit, which I learned from a Will Anderson video recently, is very helpful for me here, keeping my winning chances alive. So now we are in the end game. Alan trails by 36, but he can now set up a sequence of an out in 2 and maybe make it very close. He plays wife, which is objectively his second best endgame play. It doesn't win objectively because I can just play to the triple, but I did not know any of these words, and it didn't seem to matter to me though over the board because drag seemed to win comfortably because I had Alan on L and U. I mistracked, which is of course another of the many mistakes that you're just going to make as a beginner. And of course I'm not a beginner in tile tracking, but it happened to me noticeably more often than in German, where I mistrack maybe once in 20 games. Here I had like 3 or 4 games in a tournament where I mistracked because I was so overwhelmed with everything. So with L and U on Alan's rec, I would not be in danger. So I played drag quite carelessly here. But with I and U, I'm really lucky here that uni is just barely not enough for him to win. And of course, I need to be careful not to challenge Nisi here, which I had never seen. And which he was kind of hoping I would challenge because then he would still overtake me. But just leave it on the board. It is valid. And win by 2 points. A very lucky win. And after another loss to the top seed Chris Vickery, we will move on to round 15, where I play Marten Bjorkman. And after Martin's opening move, I get to play a German word here, Volk, getting rid of the V. And I could have followed up this German word with some French by playing the very nice move of suivez over here. The engine also likes just fishing by dropping the Z, but I didn't want to fish, as I already mentioned. And I don't see suivez, even though I had already seen that before. and settle for Sitz for 38. I was not happy with my next move of knee, keeping the U and the G, but just didn't find anything better. The Nigel play in this position is really fun. U leg side for 18. Marten now plays the first bingo, but this happens to run into jeune from me for over 50, so now I do get to play a French word, I guess. My next moves aren't great, there would have been better options, but again, none of them are really bad blunders at my level, and that's kind of what counts. And I kind of stay in the game, even though Marten plays this very nice bingo here of neonatal. My next moves are still the same story. Some mediocre Scrabble, some okay but not really good moves. And you will never guess what happens next, because I draw into a blank, there it is, and into a very simple bingo of reviews. That only levels the score though, and we have a close pre-end game. Marten, after challenging the hook on bands and giving me 5 more points, plays pick. But now the end of this game was very satisfying to me, and finally some good Scrabble for me, because studying paid off twice in a row here. First with Aya for 41, which puts me in the lead, and then the next move was even more fun to play, because here the only winning move happens to be Bifida. And I was so stoked that my uncertain memory of having seen this word was correct, and that I trusted that memory here, as I set out in my goals earlier. And something like this is so fun, even though it is a simple move for a top player. It is so rewarding as a beginner. If you haven't played Tournament Scrabble before, plays like these are one reason to pick up playing this game. It's so fun to play this over the board. Marten didn't even challenge this, and he apparently knew it. So he just went out with sides, and it's another close win for me. It was spooky how things just seemed to work out for me so far, but there we are. I'm still playing for the podium here. A third game against Alan is next, which I was tempted to open with German, just in case that this has some valid meaning in Scrabble, and it turns out it does. I could have played it, but I just play manga instead. It's more points anyway. Inwoven for me on the next move with this rack for 14, keeping the Z, is creative, but probably just a little bit too creative. I should just play Wiz or something here and accept the suboptimal rack leaf. But keeping the Z works out perfectly in this case, because Alan dumps some vowels with a non-bingo, a radio, and that gives me a 73-point Z play. On the next move, I miss a bingo, miss in the sense that I don't know it. Pause the video if you want to find it. Uncloven is valid. And instead I play Vodun and get 5 extra points for a challenge. Valn would have been clearly better here, but I didn't know the N hook to I. My next move, unfortunately, is an unforced error, because I very unnecessarily phony with Clive in this position. This was just a lapse of memory. I was debating between Clive and Clove, and I thought both were valid, and this is simply not a word. Alan challenges it off and basically evens the score with Doom. I play Clove now instead, and just out of habit at this point, draw into a blank. And this move that I played, you can see what I played with this rack is, you know, if you give this position to 100 experts, I don't think anyone plays Dyke Watts here, so why on earth did I play that? Well, because it was just the first bingo that I saw and that I was convinced was a word. I had studied the weird words, as I already mentioned, so I'm going to see a Q bingo here instead of the many other high probability words that are in this rack, and especially instead of stadium, which I really should have seen here. Instead, I was debating and agonizing over re-audits, because this seemed very plausible to me. And I did remember and did know that pre-audit is good, but do I remember that as a front hook? So I took some time thinking about that and not wanting to lose too much time. When I finally decided I'm not going to risk re-audits, let me just play the first thing that I see. So I played Dyke Watts with a blank Q. But one upside here is that this gets another +5 from Alan, and as long as he doesn't triple, it's now again looking quite good for me in this game. Especially because I draw another S and can play Hans here for 38. The standout play that I didn't know here would have been Unhead and Cloven. But I play Hans, Alan plays Tile, which is one worry less for me. He blocks the triple, so I don't have to do that. And now I have another moment that to me internally during the game was pretty funny. It's something that probably all of you who have played in tournaments have experienced before. At first glance, something like Heath looks like the best play that I can see with this rag, but that leaves full as a rag leaf, which isn't great. Oh, but I can get rid of that by playing Hateful. Too bad that it doesn't fit here. Wait a minute, what am I doing? I have another age, so let me just play Hateful. Yeah, I throw that on the board immediately because this is, once I see it, because this is of course an instant winning play because I'm now up by 167. 2 moves later, Alan gets a bingo on the board, but I've drawn into the X, and after helix and a few endgame plays, I win by about 120 points. So it just doesn't stop. I am still in contention for the top places. I'm in 3rd place, and now I get to play Rory again. Which is kind of unfortunate for this recap because that name just doesn't roll off the tongue at all as a German, and now I will have to try that even more often. I guess at least Rory is not a squirrel. Of course, the first 2 games against Rory didn't make me very optimistic that I would have a chance here to win the 3rd one, but you never know. And again, it starts terribly for me, or I start by playing terribly. After Rory's opening play of B, I have no idea here whether grew or web or wept or pew or something through that E is correct, and I finally settle on Peg, figuring that this makes parallel plays a bit more difficult maybe, and also getting rid of both the G and breaking up the bad BP combo. So this is of course an okay play, but the star play here is a 3-letter word that I had a blind spot for in this position because it's such a strange one. Twoop or something, however that is pronounced, is a Welsh word, and in a bunch of places here. And I think this means something like stupid, which in itself is just really twip. So after Peg, I draw into 2 consonants and I exchange tiles for the first time here in the entire tournament in round 17, something that would be completely unheard of in German. Rory also exchanges 6 tiles, so his pickup after his 2 short plays must have been dreadful. And I have, you guessed it, drawn a blank and can play a simple bingo like detours or something, hooking B. Or I could, because I cannot for the life of me find a solution here during the game. I simply did not see detours, did not find it. Thought about just blindly guessing that roasted could be a word, which it is, but this would have been a pure guess, and I somehow am completely stumped here. I didn't want to phony again, so I'm not risking that. And this is not a good feeling, because in this case, I know very well in the game that playing out here is a really lame play. Probably my worst play of the tournament. Not a case of, although there's something else coming later, I shouldn't say that too early. This is not a case of playing something decent and moving on. It's a really bad play. And in response, Rory bingos with Mamas, and it's 21 to 109 after 3 moves. And I draw more consonants and don't know the one bingo that is actually possible here. Dastards. I have heard the word dastardly before, but didn't know this one. Didn't know something like didst either, but don't want to telegraph the fact that I have another S anyway, which is why I play dirt instead of the higher scoring darts, just to keep 2 S hooks on the board and not give Rory that kind of information. So on the next draw, things don't get better, and again, I don't want to play something like dags here. I want to keep the S hooks open and not telegraph the S to Rory, so I exchange again, just not finding anything. 31 points after 5 moves, and I couldn't believe that for a 3rd game in a row, Rory had to be wondering whether I was just boycotting the first half of every Scrabble game I played or something. He was a very pleasant opponent, by the way. I just want to note that. You get different kinds of people sitting across from you, and I met all kinds of new people at this tournament, of course, and Rory was a very pleasant opponent, very nice guy. And finally, on the next move, I managed to play a bingo, but barely, because this one for 65 points didn't feel great either. There are better bingos here, needless to say, these were not in my word knowledge. But I was just happy to at least see something here, get something on the board, because this is, of course, at first glance, if you draw something like this, this is another rec where you might get lost fishing if you don't see anything. So, after that, once again, the tile gods reward me for a suboptimal play by giving me the Z and the X. And probably my placement of this bingo isn't even optimal, but I get royally rewarded for it. And suddenly I'm actually in the lead, because apart from the bingo, Rory has had himself a difficult start to this game. And now a crucial turn, because you can see what Rory puts down on the board here with this rec. And this is a phony, crimpage. And this is an example where I cannot just trust that my opponents will know what they're doing, which I generally had to do otherwise if I didn't want to challenge every other turn. That would be too costly. I would be gifting my opponents 50 points per game or something. But in some spots you need to be suspicious, so I had to select when to be suspicious, and this is a prime example of that. Rory plays this after a long think. He seems a bit hesitant, and also crucially, at a glance, it seems like he might not have another bingo with these tiles. The word itself also seems like one that you could make up, so this is absolutely a play you need to challenge. And it is a phony, and that of course changes the course of the game. And we should quickly note here that there is in fact a bingo with Rory's tiles here, but you know, not a normal bingo, no below Nigel level bingo. If you're a top player, pause the video and try to find the Nigel play. It is grape lice. Can't fault yourself for not seeing that, even if you're a top player like Rory, a 1600 player. So now I'm actually taking a pretty sizable lead with Zadie. Another fun option that I could have played here after challenging off his phony is Hwill and Dirty, which is presumably more Welsh, but Zadie is just better overall. Rory plays Magic, and I have this pretty awful pickup, which I end up cleaning up with exactly that word. Maybe not the best play, but it cleans up the rec nicely. And after my next pretty simple move, I am somehow leading by about 60 points. And Rory needs to come back, and he opens quite aggressively here playing Wygo, but this gives me a very convenient high-scoring response. And after he needs to get rid of the Q with this creative move, and I have a U to take advantage of that, it's suddenly looking quite realistic that I might actually win against him. Rory draws the next clunky tile, the J, so he doesn't get a chance to bingo still. And the board doesn't have any good bingo lanes anyway. And I can play Ethan here and lead by 86. This does open a bingo line, of course, but it also pretty much forces Rory to bingo to that triple. And he does probably the only thing he can do, not having a bingo line there, which is to open another line. But again, I can perfectly use that. He draws a V. He needs to play Viper, and I draw, of course, the other blank. And after some thought, find a bingo that I'm certain of, redrafts, and that's it. I actually win, and by 150 points even when all is said and done. And I couldn't believe it. After the terrible start in this game, I think I did play solidly here for my level. But of course, it was also a lot of luck on my part with the two blanks again and clunky letters for him. But now I'm somehow in second place before the last round. Here are the standings again. Chris has clinched the tournament, unsurprisingly, but I'm playing for the podium. And the pairings for the last round give us a direct matchup between Rory and me yet again for second place. However, it doesn't actually look that good for me, because if I lose, which of course I absolutely expected to do against Rory again, Rory and Erik will probably overtake me. My spread is not great, my tiebreaker. So this second place is less safe than it looks, and I was not expecting still to finish on the podium. But here we go, fourth game against Rory. And I was so relieved here starting this game to draw a great opening rec where I can play Japan or Jelab, which I didn't know. Japan is not only a proper noun, of course, but like German has some other definition that makes it allowable in Scrabble. Rory answers with Fig. I play Vaughn. He exchanges, and I play Pond, hooking Figo, knowing fully well that this cannot be the optimal move and that I probably don't know the words that are necessary here, but I should have seen Ply, which is clearly better, way better. And I did even see the other top move of Jalopy, but was very, very uncertain there and didn't want to risk it. Pawn puts me ahead by 50, which is not looking too bad. And it's not starting well at all for Rory, who plays are we clearly having too many vowels, and then just Mew for 7 points, and then Oak here, again having too many vowels after my play of hooking a wheel here. So now I somehow lead by 70, but after I put down 30, Joe for 30, he gets a bingo on the board and closes the gap. Geo from me here is an okay next move, but now Rory thinks for a long time before finally committing to this bingo, a lighter, and I get similar vibes to the previous game with Crimpage, and it turns out that those vibes are again correct. It's a phony, another huge break for me. Now, I don't really know what to do on my next move here. I end up playing Eta for 28 because, well, I have options like Rabbit. I cannot play that because that gives back Lathier to Rory. And if I play something like Tribal over here, which looks best on equity, I have no idea with my word knowledge if I'm giving him a triple. So I just wanted to play something that doesn't open any new floaters. It turns out that Rory just has enthralls anyway, but he either doesn't see it, doesn't know it, or isn't sure of it. And after a long think, he plays high for 20. I'm again not sure what to do with this and just play limbs in the end, because this of course takes out by far the best bingo line. Also I thought because this line is also pretty nice, and Rory plays fault here and takes the lead. And now this game suddenly falls apart for me a bit. Bin is of course not a great play here, but I did not see anything else. Didn't play nib because an N seemed more dangerous as the last letter in the bingo line. But again, I was lacking the word knowledge to find better options here, which absolutely exist. And the next moves don't get any better for me, but so it looks, the next pickup doesn't look good, but Rory's play of Roo bails me out here. I can play at least Horn for 33 and hope for a good pickup, which I don't get, so it's an exchange with this rack. But you'll notice what I have picked up in the meantime, and I really wanted to laugh at this point, because the blanks just kept finding their way onto my racks, although in this game at least Rory had the first one. I had one single game in the entire tournament of 18 rounds where I had no blanks, an ungodly amount of blank luck. Again, I will talk about that later more. But here it comes at a very opportune moment, because after Rory's play of if, I can almost win the game and second place in the tournament on the spot with something like Sondage or Sodane, or my best bingo of Noseband, which is really stylish. And I wish I could tell you that I did, but unfortunately, here comes the worst blunder of my tournament, and it's the worst possible timing for it. So I already mentioned that I focused on studying unusual bingos, not the one with easy letters, partly because the reasoning is that I will find something with the easy letters most of the time anyway. And that does hold true here, because even if I don't know the best bingos, there's a simple play like something like Donates here that I can play, and that has a good shot of winning the game. So I don't really depend on seeing these other bingos here, and that's why I haven't studied Sondage and so on. But I don't quite commit to Donates here, because I'm very worried about overlaps now. I'm not that far ahead after this low-scoring bingo, and then overlap with the X, which is still lurking, might bring Rory back into the game. And the same is true if I play Anodizer over here, that also creates an X spot. So in the end, I figure I really need to play a bingo starting here. I can't afford to play a suboptimal bingo here. And that is my downfall in this case, because suddenly I think, oh, I can just play Celadon. That's a word I've seen before, so trust your word knowledge. I know that this is a word. And you can take a guess where I have in fact seen this word before. I've seen it in German. This is, of course, the one mistake that is still missing from this recap. Mixing up my languages. This is an obscure word in German. This is not everyday German, so it doesn't look like I don't know which language I know this from. And I just mix it up. I'm so sure this is a word, so I'm pretty surprised when Rory challenges it. To me, this looks like a desperation challenge, but it comes back red as a phony, and that sucks in this position. Rory now plays a very interesting move. He has this rack, as he later told me. He plays Dirge, hooking Gios. And what's even more interesting is that this is a phony. as well. I did not suspect this at all. This did not seem like an uncertain or a guessing move on his part. So had I challenged this, we would have had, again, a completely different conclusion to this game. But I don't challenge it, and now I have to commit to Energizer because I don't know Soulender in this position. So again, a little bit of better word knowledge would have won me the game here, but with Anodizer, Rory's galaxy brain move actually with Sturge pays off because he gave himself 6 chances to draw the X. He understood what was going on. He was holding the V with Sturge, and he now has Vex for 62. And that, of course, should be enough for him to win. But it's still not the last plot twist here, because it gets even more humiliating for me. Because I actually draw into a winning endgame here, but I'm not good enough to win it. And the solution here would have been findable, but I don't see it. And you can try to find it if you like. It is very findable. And I was looking at the right spot because it's a pretty obvious spot that overlaps down here are pretty good. And I saw that I can play Rave here, but I don't see anything that goes all the way down here, so that's not enough to win. And I figured, okay, there's no chance for me to win. But I missed Eve, which can so easily happen because seeing these hooks is not automatic yet for me at all. So much in Scrabble works on instinct by seeing things automatically. I had to think about every single hook consciously during this tournament, and here I did not do that thoroughly enough. And if you can hook the E here, you can play Reeled as a wonderful winning play, a great overlap. And as it is, I play red, and Rory was still unsure about winning this game even after red. Engine analysis says that he has quite a few winning moves here, but during the game he thought he had to risk Clucky for 34 here. I challenged this one, obviously, but it's good. Much to his relief, he wasn't certain. Clucky seems to mean something like chicken. The sound chicken makes is chickens make is clucky. And I challenged this, so it's another +5 for him, and the rest doesn't really matter. I play I, he plays Tuna. I play Let. No optimal moves from either of us, but he wins by 25 points. A dramatic conclusion to my tournament, and a game I really should have won. But that's still not the final plot twist, because in a final stroke of luck for me, the other results in this round went my way, and so I somehow stayed in 3rd place after all, and made the podium here in this tournament, which I really did not see coming. Here we are, along with the winners of the German tournament. From the left, it is Rory, it is Ben, Chris, me, and the winners of the German tournament, Christoph Farkas, Friedrich Engelke, Jörg Diersen. Christoph Farkas, the young guy in red here, in green here, is remarkable because he's kind of the German Stefan Fatzis. He's a journalist who wrote a piece about Scrabble like 2 or 3 years ago at most, and started playing himself and immediately became a top player. And he wins the quite strong German division here. So congrats again to him. And my result, 3rd place here, I was, to use my favorite word in the English language, flabbergasted about this result. I usually actually do tend to believe in myself quite optimistically, but I genuinely thought this was out of the question beforehand. And I've mentioned a few times now that luck was really on my side here. I think my approach that I detailed earlier worked out pretty well also, but luck was on my side, mostly in terms of the blanks. I drew 24 against 12 blanks in 18 rounds. That makes it a lot easier. Here we see that broken down by tiles again in a very nice free tournament statistic tool that I'm going to link in the video description. It's not used very much. It's not that well known, but it's very nice. And as a consequence, my rating in the world ranking, as a consequence of my tie lock here, I should say, is clearly too high, but we can take a look at that as well. I now have a Vespa profile. I have a world ranking rating, even though I don't actually appear in the published world ranking because my rating is provisional until I've played, I think, 40 games or something. But my rating is 1682 now, and that's definitely too high. There's no way I'm 1680 currently. I'm maybe at 1600, but probably 1550 or something. But this is, of course, just the first step for me, and I had so much fun playing in this tournament. I feel very encouraged to go on playing in English besides German, and we've seen what huge gaps I still have in my word knowledge, so I'm excited to fill those and improve as a consequence so that I can hopefully actually live up to that rating in the future. I really enjoy studying, which seems like a good place to be in if you want to play a Scrabble tournament. So I'm excited to do that and play in more tournaments. It won't happen very often, I have to say, because there aren't many tournaments in mainland Europe. And one thing I do not enjoy is traveling. It stresses me out to no end. I've never even left Europe in my life yet, and I'm also not exactly swimming in money. But I might realistically compete in some tournaments in the UK in the future, and I will definitely make recaps about that. And now, last but not least, I want to thank Ben again for organizing this tournament. This was pioneer's work on his part. I'm looking forward to playing again. Thank you all for watching. I have to say I recorded this recap basically as a one take, not wanting to edit, but just recording and hitting pause whenever necessary. We will see how easy it is to follow that, so I'm happy if you give me feedback on what to improve. This is a first attempt at recaps in English. I wanted to not put a ton of work into this. I just wanted to gauge interest in how well that is received. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.